of First Peter together, just talking about what it really means for us to take church really outside the four walls. But more than that, how do we be a Jesus people in the midst of our society and our world today? What I'm going to do is I'm going to read First Peter chapter 1, verse 22, I think is where I'm going to start. And then if you have a Bible, you can follow along with me, pull it up on your phone. If you don't have a physical Bible and you would like one, again, we always encourage you take notes, write stuff down, jot it down. We'd love to gift you a physical Bible if you do not have one today. So come find me. We've got a stack of them over here for you. Hopefully that stalls long enough for you to get there. And let me read 1 Peter chapter 1, starting in verse 22. Since you have purified yourselves by your obedience to the truth, so that you show sincere brotherly love for each other, from a pure heart love one another constantly, because you have been born again, not of perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living and enduring word of God. For all flesh is like grass, and all its glory is like the flower of the grass. The grass withers and the flower fails, but the word of the Lord endures forever. And this word is the gospel that was proclaimed to you. Therefore, rid yourselves of all malice, all deceit, all hypocrisy, envy, and slander. Like newborn infants, desire pure spiritual milk of the word, so that you may grow up into your salvation. If you have tasted and seen that the Lord is good, as you come to him, a living stone, rejected by people, but chosen and honored by God, you yourselves, as living stones, a spiritual house, are being built to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Kyle. For those of you who don't know me, I say this every time. My name is Fred. I usually see me, I'm one of the sound guys here. And every now and then I get the honor to get up and share with you like I do today. Let me just address, there is a lot of emotion in the room, a lot of blubbering, a lot of tears, and that's really powerful. It's really important. And I've been experiencing, as we've been kind of expecting this, my own experience with that the past couple of weeks. And I just shared with somebody earlier that I've had a week of just being grumpy. And that's my kind of grieving that they're moving. And so I've had some grumpiness for lots of things. And it's along with that, but I know that's part of my grieving process and how much I'm going to miss them. And as I share this morning, in some ways, it'll be a little anticlimactic from that moment, because what you just saw is a great example of what we'll be talking about this morning, about everyday care, about people who care for each other, and the kind of care and love that John and Hannah have shown to all of us, to the connections that we have for them. And so in many ways, what we just saw was the sermon, was the life of living and following Jesus Christ and what that is like. And so as we gather this morning, as I talk, it will be to recognize that that's what it looks like to live and love well and to care for people and to be in those relationships. And so we have been, as Kyle said, in this series called Everyday Church. And I really appreciate that idea, that one that we talk about a lot here is being the everyday church and everyday people. And I think it's important for us because it reminds us that church is not just a program or a place to go or this building. It really reminds us that the church is something to be lived out in our lives. It's something that about who we are, and that the church, again, is not the building, and depending on which generations you come from and where you've been in the world, sometimes you see very ornate and beautiful architecture, and sometimes you see a box that's gray and black, and there's just not much in there. It's just simple, because it's not about any of that. It's about us living this out in our lives. And so this morning, we're going to share about this everyday care, and not everyday care. It's everyday care. So those are two different things. And I love that the song that we kind of concluded with going to this, and I'm not sure, Jared, if we can get this up. I should have asked you before, but we had the shake up the ground, right? Talking about shaking up this ground and breaking up the ground of all here. Shake up the ground of all my traditions, break down the walls of all my religion. This is powerful because part of what we're talking about is what it means to be everyday church is to do that, to shake that up and to not look at it as some place we go on Sunday, but a life that we live out each day around us and the people that we're connected to. And when we start to care, for people around us every day, what we begin to do is become people who live a life of what we would call pastoral care. Because being a pastor is not about a title or a role or those kind of things. It's about what you do with your life and the love and care you show for others, the people around you. And so we're going to talk about that. And we should all live in a way that focuses on caring for others, our family, our loved ones. And sometimes they're the hardest, right? Sometimes they're loved ones. I annoyed my wife already this morning. Well, I shouldn't say already. I do it mostly every morning. But I, those are things that we do, but we need to be people, not only care for our loved ones and the people around us, our kids, but our neighbors and our friends, and make those connections. And so we picked this up in 1 Peter 22. And depending on your translation, it starts with a little different word. The one we had up on the screen that Kyle wrote started with the word since. Sometimes it starts with the word now or now that. And the idea is there's a transition happening in this space as we get to that. It says, now that you have purified yourselves. And so there's a presumption here that you have purified yourself, that there's something preceding this that's going on in this moment. And that presumption is this purification. And if you go back, and you don't have to go back here, but you can go back and look at it later. And I encourage you to read 1 Peter, the whole book. It is amazing, but especially this first chapter. But if you go back just a couple of verses to verses 18 and 19, what you'll see was that being purified, that purifying yourself, is about being redeemed by the precious blood of Jesus. That it's about not what we do or how holy or righteous or self-righteous we are, but about who Jesus is in our lives and that he is the one who makes us clean. Now, I don't know, you've been in churches probably, I don't know if this is the first time you've been to church, maybe you've been going your whole life, maybe you've popped in here and there. One of the things that happens when you go to church, and I hope we do this here, is you have people like myself who stand up here and teach really good principles for living. That's what part of what it means to be a follower is there's principles that we are given to live by. And most of the time, if you follow those, your life begins to go better. Not always. Sometimes it's more difficult. But in many things, life seems to be moved. In fact, I remember years ago about people, some missionaries working down in an area of South America where people were turning to Christ because they saw that the Christians' lives were so much better. Not because of Jesus, but because they saw the result of what it meant to follow Jesus. So what happens is we get up here and we teach these principles. We talk about living and doing good things and caring for others and loving people. And those are all good things. They are all the things that we're supposed to be doing in the way we live. But I got to let you know, that's not what it's all about. When we get into this verse, this part where it says, now that you have purified yourself, this is a key component, a key transition to making sure as we do those things that it's not just about good living or right principles or back when I did youth ministry, they called it straight edge and just kids who didn't do anything kind of crazy or weren't into drugs or anything. But it is about Jesus. And it's one of the things I love when we do at the end our prayer. The prayer we do all together. There's a little line that every time I read it, it says, because of Jesus, right? I want you to think about that at the end. We get this because of Jesus. That's everything that we do is about him. So we get in here and we talk about these principles. It starts with now that you have purified yourself, now that you have connected yourself to Jesus, now that you've been redeemed by his blood, his sacrifice, and it begins there. If you have never done that, if you've never made that decision and say, I want to be forgiven for what I've done, I want to be connected to Jesus because he died and rose again, that he sacrificed and he bled for me. That's where it begins, and it's a journey from there. But I got to tell you, it's not an easy journey. Right. We do the principles, but have great principles. There's ways we should live. God gives us some models of that in what we do in our life, but that's not what it's really about. Because some of the things Jesus said don't make it really that comfortable or that easy. It's kind of like this. I think sometimes we think about religion and spirituality in our society. Sometimes we think about it like going shopping for a car, right? They all kind of basically do the same thing, but some have some features we want, and they look a little cooler, right? And so we're going to go pick that one, and we're going to shop. But the difference is just think about a salesman kind of using Jesus' tactics, right? You go to the salesman, and the salesman tells you, listen, this car is amazing because when you buy it, everyone's going to hate you, right? You're going to love driving it because it's really uncomfortable, right? What you're going to find out in this car is that you're going to have to die to yourself so you can drive this car. That's not about you. It's about the car, right? Can you imagine that? He says, not only that, you're going to have to spend your life working on it and reading the manual every day, right? That's the Jesus tactic for talking about who he is. And so he's not telling you these principles are great and they help us live, but that's not really what he's selling. He's selling a connection to him that he gave his life so that we can be connected. So when we think about everyday care, it begins by being cared with this great pastor, Jesus, in our life and being connected to him so that it can overflow in our lives to others, that it can make a difference. And it's about the relationship with him, his death, burial, and resurrection. And so once we have that, that changes the trajectory of our life. It changes the direction of what we do and how we live. And so this is where he's going in 1 Peter. Now, or since you've been purified, there's something different. Your life is now headed in a different direction. And so here's what it is. By obeying the truth so that you have sincere love for each other. Love one another deeply from the heart. So this is the trajectory. Now that you're with Jesus, you have to have sincere love deeply from the heart. So we begin to live differently. And I love this because it's really interesting. If you've read this and you're kind of like, I'm not sure why he transitions from that to then verse 23 and 24 and 25, where he says, you have been born again. This is right? We got that. That's why we start this. Not of perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living, enduring word of God. He says, for all people are like grass, and all their glory is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of the Lord endures forever. Here's what he's getting at here. He's like, your life before you were connected to Jesus, it was going to be there, going to live, and you're going to die, and that happens. But when you belong to Jesus, you begin to move this way. The things that you do have now eternal consequences, that they live forever. So in this corporeal being, in this physicality, it is temporary. We're all going to die. I think the statistic is like 1 out of every 1 people die, something like that. It's going to happen to each and every one of us, right? I mean, this is it. And that's temporary. But what we do can have eternal consequences. And this begins by loving your brothers and sisters and watching over people, sharing with them, and loving sincerely and deeply, because then that moves into what we would see as the imperishable seed, things that don't fade away. And so now we have something that we live out in our lives. There's something that's left with us forever. When John and Anna told me about what they were leaving, and I have 2 reactions that I'm struggling with it. And one is, I'm so excited for them. And the other is, I don't want them to leave. I love them, and I want to be in a relationship with them, and I want them here so we can be in that relationship here. And yet, I'm excited for them and what they're doing. But I know that it doesn't matter whether they're here or whether they're there, that at some point, I'm going to be spending eternity with them. That what we do, what they've done here, the work that they've done has eternal consequences, and we will stand together in eternity, worshiping the Lord, praising his name in the presence of God in a place that's perfection and beautiful, and we'll have all the time to hang out that could ever exist. I love the song, when we've been there 10,000 years, it will have just begun, right? That amazing grace line, and we can spend all that time because it is eternal. So he gives us this model of what it looks like to follow Jesus and why that's so important, because it's more than just a good life. And there's nothing wrong with the good life, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with you should be loving your friends, and I don't care whether you belong to Jesus or not. You should be caring for people. We should live to have a better world. But those of us who follow Christ know that there's something more to this than that. And this is what Peter's telling us in this. This is what he's reminding us of. And if he gives us some models of what that looks like, of how we respond. So he tells us first is that our love must be sincere and deep and from the heart. This word sincerely in the translation here is the word without hypocrisy. And so it means that you shouldn't have a mask. That there shouldn't be something in the way as you think about this, that you should be loving people sincerely with who you are without trying to get over on them, without trying to pretend. God, I got to tell you, it's one of the things I've loved. If you haven't been here about the past, well, this church as a whole, but the past several weeks and some of what we've done, some of the things we've talked about, some of the pains and sorrows, and from Kyle even sharing his pain and struggle in the midst of what's going on, some of the emotions, some of the blubbering again. I'm not going to let him live that down. But it's because it's real. This is who he is. It's without that hypocrisy. And I know I'm not saying we're perfect and we make mistakes, but that's the point. It is that we aren't hiding behind a perfect veneer. We're not hiding behind something that says, oh, we're holy and righteous and perfect, and all we want you to do is be like us. Now, what we're saying is we know the one who's holy and righteous and perfect, and we're trying to get to him, and want you to come along to ride with us so that we can get there together, because he's the only one who's worthy, the only one who's eternal, the only one who really matters in the greater scheme of things. And because of Jesus, we now begin to live sincerely, not acting out, not being petty, not using things like, I don't know, I'm not from the South, but I know I speak other languages. So this thing where people would say, bless their heart, right? You guys probably going to go back to a place where that comes a lot, right? Might hear that a lot, right? We know, if you speak those languages, you know that bless your heart isn't really a good thing, right? Yeah. There's a little bit lack of sincerity. And so next time you know someone who uses that kind of language, you may need to call them out of it, especially if they're followers of Jesus, right? And so we need to know that we need to be without this mask. We need to do this. And we need to love each other deeply. I love this, and I don't like this. Because the word deeply doesn't mean just lots of feels inside, right? I think sometimes if that was it, I would be okay with this. It would be just, as long as I have this emotion inside me that comes out. But there's two words that kind of come out of it for us that really are better kind of translations in it or help us define what it is. The first one is enthusiastically. That this deeply means in the original Greek is the idea of being enthusiastic about the way you love others. And I got to tell you, sometimes it's hard to be enthusiastic about that. It's hard to be enthusiastic about loving, but it's what God calls us to do. And so when he says deeply, some enthusiasm. And when I'm tired and I'm broken and I'm grumpy like I have been this week, it's hard to be enthusiastic. And yet God calls us to know that he loves us to step out on that. And then he calls us this other part of this. It would be this idea of genuinely, or what the way the original comes out, being stretched out. This idea of being stretched out. And so deeply is not only enthusiastically, but it means for a long time. And it has this picture of just loving someone over and over and over and over again, right? And so that we keep going, and that the love doesn't have an end to it. And sometimes I think that's hard, and I love some of the memes. I don't know if you've seen this one. There's a meme that goes out that says, I love Jesus is, forgive someone 70 times 7 because this person, I've been counting, I've forgiven them 490 times and one more in their mind, right? And I can tell you my wife is way past that with me, that's for sure. But we need to love each other with this depth, with this longevity, with this enthusiasm. And I got to tell you, sometimes it's hard. Yeah. This is where, if it was just, I have to feel deeply. But this enthusiasm to step up, to care for someone, to be like, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to love you in this process. And so this enthusiastically, without grumbling, that's hard. Continually, this is hard work, but it's what he calls it, the way he calls us to love. So, and that love is not just being kind or nice to someone. It's really a model of Jesus' love for us. That Jesus came and loved us so deeply, so sincerely, that he is the God of the universe who is eternal, who was there before even time began. And John tells us by him all things were created, and through him, that he from the beginning of time knew that he was going to sacrifice his life on the cross because he knew what we were going to do and how we were going to mess up, so that he might redeem us and have life with us eternally, that we might be with him. And so what he's asking us is not just to be kind to people, but he's telling us to live and love like Jesus did. And so we get into this, and I think there are some things that he tells us to avoid that are really important here. And I'm going to give you the contrast that he didn't put in, which is some things that we need to do. So he picks this up after he tells us the word of God endures forever, and this is what was preached to you, this is what you'll be following. In chapter 2, verse 1, he says, therefore, rid yourselves of all malice. He gives the whole list. Rid yourselves of all malice, all deceit, all hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. See, this is it. This is it. When you get chapter 2, verse 1, he's telling us these are the things you're going to avoid. If you belong to Jesus and you're going to love deeply, then these are things you can't be doing. These are things that can't be part of your life that you need to avoid, that you need to get rid of them. And I appreciate he says get rid of them because he acknowledges that I have them. He acknowledges that it's a problem for me and that they're part of my life and I need to get them to go. And I struggle with that. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And so he acknowledges this. He starts with this, get rid of all malice. Malice is, is evil or wicked or something that wants to do harm for someone. And so I think for most of us would go, we don't really have malice, right? We don't want to be wicked or evil. Well, there's that one person we work with that we really wish, right? There's that person in front of me on the freeway who drives way too slow, fast, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. It annoys me, and I wish bad things on them. I wish they would get a ticket. I wish there was something go on. And so we have to get this in our lives. And so he says this idea of malice that does bad. And so the contrast is that we would look and do good for other people. Remember, these are some of those principles that we live by. Doing good is for anybody to do good. But if you belong to Jesus, it has eternal consequences. I love, there's a preacher in Southern California who used to tell people, people would say, people ask me, where am I supposed to go? Where's God going to use me? How can I make a difference in people's lives? And his simple answer was, just do the most good you can. Doesn't matter what you're doing. If you have a choice between one thing or another, let's say, you're going to get the Wendy's burger, but you're like, I'm going to get the extra biggie pack because I can give somebody some chicken nuggets or whatever it is, right? So do something that does the most good you can in those moments as you're making choices. What does good in these moments? It's the opposite of malice, of doing harm or doing somebody. And then he uses the word, he says, all deceit. We got to get rid of all deceit. Those things are hard for us. The tricks, the craftiness, concealing, the lying on our taxes, or buying stuff in Oregon and not paying the taxes sometimes, right? Yeah. Yeah. Again, I'm telling you, I appreciate Peter saying this because he knows I have it and I struggle with it and I got to get rid of it. I got to work through it. But we know that, right? Those are things like, yeah, not going to get into all that right now, but we got to ask ourselves, right? So what you do instead of being tricky is you just this is simple, be honest and truthful. Not mean. I'm not saying be mean. Some people believe in being brutally honest. The brutally shouldn't be part of it. You need to be lovingly honest. Talk with people in a way that speaks to their good, to help them grow. Do things that do good and speak honestly and truthful in love. This is where we go to, and how you talk to people. When you look at someone, even those who at work, that person, whatever it is you struggle with, speak to them in a way that tries to build them up and lift them up and supports them. We talked about this one. He says, get rid of all hypocrisy, right? That got to go, that mask, that can't be there. I will tell you this. One of the things I really love about hospice ministry and being a hospice chaplain is when I go into people's houses, the masks are down. When you have gone and you're on hospice and you're dying, and sometimes people have months and even years, but we have those conversations. The masks most of the time go away because we got to get into the real stuff. And I hope we're a church that you can come in and feel like you don't have to put that mask on. And I know it's for some of us it's natural, but we got to break down the walls of all our religion, right? We got to shake up all of our tradition, and we got to change this and make a difference in our lives and be sincere and gentle. This is what will draw people to us in this. So what do? Just be sincere. Just be sincere with people. Be caring and loving to be honest with them. Have that sincerity that says, oh, I'm struggling with this. I'm having a hard time coming up and doing this. I was really blessed that when I did youth ministry years and years ago, I had a mentor who used to just say to me, you know what? Just be honest, love the kids, and let them minister to you. And I'd be like, what? That's all I'm here to do that for them. Like, no, you're here to journey with them. Let them minister to you when you're having hard times. Just be sincere. And it's really made a difference in the way I relate and connect. So he says, be sincere. Then he says, get rid of all envy, right? We're all supposed to be envy. This is hard. This is hard. This is something where like we hate somebody for what they have. Boy, this is hard in our society because there are a lot of people who have and a lot of us who have nots. And we really sometimes look at this and we see people and we go, wow, I'm angry because they have that. And we need to get rid of that. That needs to not be a part of our lives. We need to actually want more for them as we want more for ourselves, right? If we want more, we need to want more for them. I remember Jesus said something like, love your neighbor as yourself. So if I want something good for me, if I want something good in my life, if I want to have in my life, I need to have that for my neighbor. I need to want them to have those same things. So that's the way we get rid of envy. Say, I want this good in my life and I want this good for them, to want more for them. And then he says to get rid of all slander. This slander actually is, sometimes we think about this in legal terms, like in a court of law. This is actually, the word there is simply evil speaking against or harming or something that speaks down to someone. It just means things that's going to hurt someone, things that are going to cause a problem. Whether it's true or not is not the issue. The issue is how you're speaking to people. So what do you do instead? Speak life. Be encouraging in the way you speak to people. Be uplifting. Well, you can't say this enough. I think really we need to speak love into people's lives and remind them, even when it's not easy. I have to tell you, this will be later in my discomfort section I talk about briefly, but I actually, one of the things I've said to people, I've done it in the past few weeks, and I've said it to adults, and I've said it to people who are older than me, is this phrase that sometimes when I say it feels really awkward because it's not the way we normally speak to people in our lives. But some people had gone through some stuff, could come out the other side, and I just looked at them and said, you know what? I'm really proud of you for that. Now, normally it feels like that's something you say to a kid or somebody younger or something like that. And I remember both of these people the last couple of weeks were just taken aback, and I could see just them light up with me noticing how powerful that was because of what they had done and overcome, and that I was proud of them for that. It was amazing what they do. It's sometimes speak life. When you start to speak life into people, be encouraging. You won't believe what can happen. And I can tell you that's a change for me. I didn't grow up in an environment like that. And that's something that had changed years ago in my life. And so this is what we do. This is how the tasks of doing it. So I'm just going to say this, the list of what not to do. But what we want to do is do good. We want to be honest and truthful. We want to be sincere. We want more for other people, or at least the same as for ourselves. And we want to speak encouraging words. And this is how we do this. And how do you do those things every day? So I'm going to give you another list. This is the everyday tasks you can do it. The first thing is you got to take time to do it. I don't care what it is. It takes some time. Maybe it's just writing a card. Some of you are really, really gifted at this. You send out cards. I think some of you do it from here. You send a note where you send out a card that comes back and you tell people how much you appreciate them or their birthdays or whatever. I think that's an amazing gift. Kendra and I just celebrated our 20th anniversary. We never even sent out our thank you cards yet. I'm still working on them. Thank you. We appreciate it. You probably need once we get those thank you cards out for the wedding, I'll let you know. Just not a gifting of mine. I'm so thankful for people who have that because it speaks to me. And when I get them and a handwritten note, it so just lifts my spirits. And we don't always get to see that, but if that's a gift for you, God bless you. But that takes time. Sometimes it's sitting down with someone. Sometimes it's going over to someone's house and going, hey, I have a s'mores pack from church, right? And go, well, why don't you just to enjoy yourself? Have something sweet for a sweet person or whatever you want to do. I don't know what you want to do. Whatever you want to say. But the other thing I think you can do that if you have more time is you can go, it's Halloween. Kids are running around. I got my front yard. I got a little burner set up, and let's sit down and have some s'mores. Maybe if you're not a s'mores person, you're a taco person, you love to cook, set up a taco station for the adults walking by while they're going. Do something that gives you just an extra couple of minutes with people, and then you can say, hey, it's really great to meet you, really great to know you. Glad we got time to take a s'more. You know what? Our church is having a harvest festival tomorrow. Why don't you take one of these and bring your kids? Or you can say, hey, I do tacos every Tuesday. Why don't you come over? We'll have tacos and a beer in the garage and hang out. Just get to know each other. To spend time. Yep. Somebody's up for it. I don't think he's old enough for the second. Root beer is what I meant. So I said root beer is what I said, yeah. But here's the second thing. You have to do it with intentionality. It has to make it, you have to be like, I'm going to do it. It doesn't have to be, the time doesn't have to be a lot sometimes. You just have to be intentional about it. Maybe it's with someone at work while you're working, setting up, having conversations, taking a few minutes to talk to someone about something. Whatever is going on, to take that few minutes, be intentional about building a relationship with them, about speaking life. When you see somebody doing something good, work, home, wherever that, just call it out. Say, hey, man, that was a great job. You did awesome here. So be intentional. Do it with humility, not being better than or smarter than or anything else. But you're just on this journey, right? This whole thing about pastoral care is not about better than or superiority. It's about we're all headed toward Jesus. And then you have to do it, and this is the hard one, in discomfort. You have to do things that aren't always comfortable to you and that aren't always easy. And this may sound weird, but in my head, as I know I'm about to tell this person, these two people this past week, that I'm proud of them, in my head, I keep telling myself, Fred, they're older than you, or they're adults. That sounds dumb. You shouldn't say that. That's going to come out weird. That's going to come out awkward. You're going to look like an idiot. They're going to think you're whatever it is. And they were just, I was like, I'm not comfortable saying this, but I know it's important, and it's what I'm feeling, and I said it, and it made a difference. Not anything, but we got to do it in our discomfort, whatever that level is for us. See, because what happens is when we start to live out everyday care, we start to live out this powerful movement of caring for people, loving them because of Jesus, because of the way Jesus loves us, it really helps us grow. It really helps us become more like Jesus. Because he goes on, he tells us to get rid of all these things. And then in chapter 2, verse 2, he says, like newborn babies, right? Newborn babies love milk. They love to eat. They're excited for it. They get it. Like newborn babies crave this, crave pure spiritual milk, these things that help you grow, that connect you to the Lord, to connect you to other people. And so that you might grow up in your salvation. See, what he's saying is when you begin to do this, when you begin to live this out, live this in your life, your faith, your trust, your connection to Jesus grows. And then I love this. This is such a kind of a strange phrase, but it's so powerful when you think about it in the terms of this baby craving spiritual milk. Now that you have tasted that the Lord is good. You know, I can't tell you enough about when I find someplace wonderful, how much I'm telling people about it. When you find something you love, in fact, we have an example of it. There's a recipe on a lot of your tables here this morning for dumplings, right? We want to know, we want to share these things because it's so good. If I find a good Mexican place, I haven't found one yet here, but if I find one, I will tell you about it. Yeah, I will. Yeah, so it's just not the same. But if you do this, it's going to feed you. See, everyday care, loving other people, is what helps fulfill us and grow in our salvation. This is the amazing thing about serving Jesus. In the economy of God, we can never outgive God. We can never do so much that's more than what Jesus has done and will do for us. In the economy of God, when we give, we get returned tenfold. We grow. I remember when I first started and they told me, yeah, go help out in the youth ministry. It was not the place I wanted to go. And I got to tell you, I got in there and fell in love with it, and God used it to grow me more than I could ever imagine. See, I think that we see this living our lives every day, caring for people. This is what everyday care is about. Being involved with others, living a life that's centered on loving others because of Jesus. And then you become what I would call as a shepherd. What sometimes we more formally call is a pastor. Someone who watches over someone, not because of their title or their job, but because they are living out the kingdom of God in their life. May you go every day, everywhere, and provide that everyday care for others. An example of what we started with when we saw it here today and the impact that has when we all got up and prayed for John and Hannah, and just a glimpse of what that looks like. There was no greater message today than seeing us come together and celebrate the love and the care that they have provided here. And as much as I'm excited for the people who are there, I'm going to miss them. I hurt because they're going to be gone. That's just a symbol of the love that we have. That just means that we love and care for someone, and that we're reminded that we'll be reunited again when we step into eternity. Would you pray with me, please? Father, I thank you. I thank you that there is something so unique about following after you. Lord, that we see this transition from these temporary lives, these like grass and flowers of the field that wither and fade away. And that when we have been connected to you, when we are cleansed and receive that pure righteousness from you, Lord, that our lives become eternally impactful. And that we not only speak truth and love and care, but we can speak in a way that helps people know eternity because of you. Lord, may you lead us to be people who care for others every day, who make a difference in the life of others in the same way that you have done for us. A love that is deep, that is enthusiastic, and the love that is long and eternal. In Jesus' name, amen.